And the whole objective is to help that finance role be more efficient and effective in the application, right? I view them as kind of like an out of the box technology that you just have to turn on, right?
Yeah.
And the whole purpose behind it is to make the system easier to use for the user, to make those tasks that you're trying to do in the system more streamlined, more efficient, reduce clicks, right?
Hello, everybody. Another exciting episode of AI Got This. And today we're going to talk a little bit about Copilot and all the things Copilot. And that's exciting because we're all saying Copilot, but it's bigger than we originally thought. It's bigger than Breadbox. And so we've got Lauren Renninger returning, who was on our second episode about RPA. And we've got Gina Montgomery also joining us. And I'll let both of you introduce yourselves and say a little bit about what you're doing in the Copilot space. Lauren?
Yeah, it's nice to be back. It's good to be back. I am focused mostly on Copilot Studio. Aside from using it in my day-to-day personally, which it has been immensely helpful. It does all of the emailing for me, a lot of documentation for me. But outside of that, I am focused on delivering like Copilot Studio solutions for our clients, and how can we start to embed Copilot in our Microsoft systems, right? Like in our ERP, our CRM, and so on.
Awesome. Gina?
Yep. Hello, everyone. I'm Gina Montgomery. Happy to be here today. I'm leading our modern workplace team here at Armanino. So Copilot for M365 is something I live and breathe, and I'm excited to talk about it.
Awesome. Okay, so here's what I just heard just in the introductions, we talked about 3 different things about Copilot. What does that mean? Okay, so Microsoft in all its infinite glory has named something Copilot, which by the way is a genius name. I love it because it's your helper, right? It's your co-pilot, which I think is fantastic. But is there more than one Copilot? Help our viewers understand what that means. Maybe Gina, you can talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, sure. So Microsoft has gone Copilot crazy in the best way. And there's currently a Copilot that fits in most every aspect of your day-to-day work. So in the biz app side, we have things like Copilot for sales and field and service. We also have Copilot from a Power Platform perspective, like something from a low-code development area that Copilot can help you figure out how to whip up a Power App or something very quickly, for example. We have a Copilot Studio, like Lauren mentioned, for custom Copilot development. We also have declarative Copilots, which uses the Teams toolkit for custom Copilot development. We've got Copilot for M365, which fits in your flow of work day to day. But yes, there are Copilots all over the place, and it really just depends on what you're looking to accomplish.
So that's kind of exciting, but how do I pick what Copilot I should be using in my day-to-day life? And I mean, it sounds like the Copilot for biz apps, it's embedded inside of those business applications, right? CE, FSC. Okay. Lauren, you mentioned that you're doing mostly Copilot Studio. Say what that is and maybe dive in a little deeper there for like what kind of custom Copilots are people looking at today?
Yeah, for sure. So Copilot Studio is a means to create a custom generative AI chatbot, right? That is like a small language model, right? Because the data source that it's connected to is more singular in nature. It can certainly be expanded upon, but the whole premise or idea is that it is more narrowly focused from a topic perspective. So you may embed one on your external website so people can find information that they're looking for easier, right? We see them on employee handbooks, right? Because nobody wants to read the 400-page employee handbook. But you want to know what's the updated PTO policy or what's the updated holiday schedule. And so that can be a super simple kind of implication or application of it, and that your organization can then use it, more regularly and start to get comfortable with that.
Okay, awesome. And can you give these Copilots actual tasks to do? Like, are they executing like functions or doing part of somebody's work? And either one of you can answer that, but like I'd love to hear, because when I think of a co-pilot, and I fly a lot, I think everybody knows that. I think of somebody in the cockpit with you, like, okay, I'm driving, but you're the co-pilot. You're managing. This is not a flying reference. You're managing the radio and the temperature in the car and like all those things, right? So when we say that, how do you guys? How are we seeing Copilot actually execute tasks for us today?
Yeah, I'll take a piece of that first, Lauren, if you don't mind.
Yeah.
Being a co-pilot means that you're sitting next to the pilot, right? So the pilot, who would be the end user in this aspect, has to decide what they need help from the co-pilot, and that gets into prompt engineering, right? So we have to prompt our co-pilot with something in order for it to execute. It doesn't execute naturally. You do have to ask for help, right? So when you think about Copilot for M365, there's a lot of things that it can help you with from an execution perspective. It could be as simple as, I need help, writing an email with professional tone that's short and to the point, right? So I'm giving it some prompts around, help me formulate an email to Carmel that would help me build a business case to hire a new employee. These are the things I'm looking for, and I know this will be important to Carmel. Keep it short, keep it professional, and then Copilot will execute that task, and you can review it. Obviously, you have to check for hallucinations and make sure it makes sense, but that's from an execution perspective. Same thing on other products inside of M365. Like if you wanted to get a summary from a Teams meeting. So as long as you've turned on transcription services and Copilot's on, you have that ability to ask questions of what happened in the meeting. I love that feature just because, as Carmel said, traveling is something I do often. Sometimes I'm distracted, right? Like I might be on a call and 7 people are pinging me about something else, and I didn't listen. I missed something in the last 3 minutes of that meeting. So if Copilot was on, I can simply ask it like, hey, what I missed in the last 3 minutes of the meeting, without having to embarrass myself in front of the rest of the people on the call, right? No one knew that I spaced out for a second, not intentionally, of course, but that's just another example of something it can execute because I asked that question of it. You can do that same thing across the different apps within, Microsoft 365, but that's really what I wanted to say was the Copilot only does what the pilot tells it to do, right? So you have to give it a good prompt. So that's my tidbit.
That's a brilliant thing too, right? When you think about how people think about generative AI and that it's learning and listening all the time, it's just going to go off and do something in your environment. I think the key there is it's only doing what you tell it to do, right? And you have to ask for it. It's not just going to go run off and do something on its own. It is funny because we often talk about in AI, people often are like, well, I don't want it connected to this, or I don't want it to see this. And I'm like, your employees have that. There's no nefarious thoughts in the AI, right? It's not going, oh, hey, I'm going to write this funny email to the CEO and hope Carmel gets in trouble. Okay, Lauren, when you think about it, same question to you.
Yeah, I think I would echo the sentiment that Gina had. I mean, it is the evolution of how you get more and more comfortable providing instruction, right? So can it complete tasks for you? Yeah, only if you're good at communicating what said task needs to be, right? And so I think the one thing that I will say I do really love about Copilot, especially as it is embedded in the Microsoft or the Office 365 applications, is the opportunity to iterate, right? When you type into another generative AI model, you get one shot at that prompt and then either got to copy, repaste it, go back up, edit it, whatever. A lot of the times in Word, especially with Copilot, it will say, what do you want to edit, right? What's next? Like, do you want to iterate on that? Do you want to redo? Do you want it to be more precise? Like, how do you want the formatting? So it's also training us a little bit in return to do a better job at articulating what it is that we're asking. And I think we're going to continue to see that develop. As people naturally get better at prompt engineering, I also think that these models are naturally going to get better at prompting us for what it needs to also be sufficient.
Yeah, I love that. I love the idea that it's sort of encouraging you to be a little bit more thorough and iterate on things that, and I think the brilliant part of this too is that having Copilot embedded in the Office applications is that it's always there for you, right? It's your Copilot, it's the assistant, right? And I think it's super exciting to be able to um, do that in a way that is much more effective than trying to iterate on it by yourself. And it's an interesting thing because if you think about it as your buddy and your assistant, you can ask it those questions and it can help you think things that you didn't necessarily think before. And it also makes it so that, okay, I'm not throwing every Word document that I write over to Lauren for you to provide feedback and then, give me information. I can ask Copilot to do that, which I think is super cool. Not that I still don't do that to you, Lauren, but yeah, whatever. Okay, so we've talked a little bit about the modern work side and a little bit about the studio. Let's talk a little bit about the biz apps as well. So when we say biz apps, we mean things like Business Central, Dynamics 365 for finance and supply chain, and the CE or CRM Copilot. And I think Copilot has come out or Microsoft has come out with Copilot for finance, Copilot for service and field service, and then Copilot for sales. What's the difference there? What does that mean when they say those things?
Yeah, I think the point of those is that they're role specific, right? Or they're kind of objective specific, if you will. And so they're co-pilots that are specific for finance, right? In Business Central or in finance and supply chain. And the whole objective is to help that finance role be more efficient and effective in the application, right? I view them as kind of like an out of the box technology that you just have to turn on, right? And the whole purpose behind it is to make the system easier to use for the user, to make those tasks that you're trying to do in the system more streamlined, more efficient, reduce clicks, right? So finance, we think about things like reducing your month-end close process, right? If we're talking about sales, we're thinking about reducing the entire sales cycle timeline, right? With things like being able to say, what's happening with this deal? Oh, I need to send a follow-up email. Let me do that right now. I need to actually update this opportunity. The little things that really do add up, and you have to navigate through the system, finding the reduction in that. I think field service is going to be massively beneficial as it continues to ramp up. Because it is focused on how do we support the technicians as they go out into the field, right? What do they need to have on their truck that's ready to go so that they can service this client? What do they need to report on? What do they need to make sure that they're recording through that visitation or through that repair cycle that they're working through? And so, having that checklist rather than, oh crap, I got on site and I didn't realize that was the problem and I forgot this part and now I've just wasted an hour in transit going back and forth so that I can get this part. And so I think that's the whole intention behind it all is reducing clicks, having that level of preparedness and increasing the efficiency and the productivity.
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the things that I noticed in the biz apps too is that we're going to see the adoption of those tools become a little bit more. I think we'll see them move a little faster because they're so specific and have a focus, right? Still, you're going to have to ask it to do things, but you can set it up on a recurring basis, which is kind of exciting. Okay, I'm going to switch gears just a little bit because we've sort of talked about the different co-pilots. But one of the things we also hear on a regular basis, and I'd love your guys' feedback for this and maybe talk a little bit about how this works, but people are like, yeah, but you're turning on Copilot, and how can I put sensitive information in Copilot? Like, what does it have access to? How do I know it's not being nefarious? What is it touching? Is it feeding information to the World Wide Web, and are they learning from what I'm putting in my Copilot? And like, can I put sensitive information in there? What does that look like? And Gina, maybe you can tackle that first, but how are we protecting that? What does that actually mean to people when we say Copilot?
Yeah, that's a great question, Carmel. And as a company starts to think about rolling something like Copilot for M365 out, they got to think of how to be prepared from the data perspective. And there's some things like a checklist that would help, but if you think about it, generally speaking, it sits on the graph, right? So first of all, do you have your data in M365, or are you still leveraging on-prem file shares or some other tool? If you have most of your data sitting in M365, so you're leveraging SharePoint, you're leveraging OneDrive, you're using email, you have data flowing in and around it. What Graph will do is take a look at all of the data that's inside there based upon current permissions. So if I wanted to ask, how much does my CEO get paid? I probably wouldn't see that information just because I asked the question, unless for some reason I had granted permission to that document that held the information about payroll, right? So that's just an example. So having a good process in place to understand data oversharing risks is where we like to see customers start. And so like, how do you do that, right? Well, you've got to do some inventory on your own. And there's a variety of ways to do that. You can do it through PowerShell. You can do it through the Graph Connect app. There's a variety of ways. There's third-party tools that can show you what are all the current permissions in the environment, right? And that starts with your SharePoint sites. Are they public or private? And same thing with Teams and Teams channels. Are they public? Are they private? So, looking at public versus private, and then you have to decide if you want to make changes to that. And then also looking at the file level and permission level that exists today. Like, or is it shared with everyone? A lot of people always select that. If you have like some data retention policies or compliance policies in your organization, and every time you create a new Word doc, you have to add a sensitivity label to it. And everybody says, share it with everyone because that's easiest. I don't want to deal with those permissions later. How do you find those, right? Like how many shared with everyone documents exist in your environment? That's another example of looking at data oversharing risk. But from a remediation perspective, there's lots of things you can do. Microsoft has released just recently the ability to exclude certain SharePoint sites from search, from Graph, so that those things just won't even be searchable, right? So you have that opportunity. And then you also have the opportunity to, audit on an ongoing basis and then make those changes to the data itself. So it doesn't share any of your information with the World Wide Web, but as far as searchability goes, internally, end users will see what they have permission to see. So getting an idea of how to govern that is really important. We do see customers also leveraging things like Purview. If they want to get into labeling, there's some triggers that Microsoft has put in place depending on the label that you have associated to the content in your environment. It will or will not pick that up. So that's another way to, really remediate that. But yeah, it's a great question. I didn't mean to get so prescriptive, but you do need to understand data oversharing risks and then how you might remediate those moving forward.
No, I mean, I think the detail is awesome, right? And it's something that people need to be aware of. And I think part of demystifying all this stuff for folks is really understanding that level of, what's capable, what are we capable of doing and what are we not capable of doing? And how do we, protect the information that's in our graph that maybe we don't want to share with everybody. So I think that's awesome.
The other thing, if you don't mind, I just want to point out,
don't mind at all.
That's talking about what lives in M365 already. You can also connect from an extensibility perspective to file shares as well as other third-party SaaS applications. It could be things like Salesforce or Confluence or Jira. Like there's a whole bunch of connectors available. So I know we're talking about how to kind of keep it tight, but if you did want search to work across all those other places that you have content stored, you can configure that right out of the box with Copilot for M365 as well. So Graph can crawl and search those things. Same concepts apply, right? It depends on what permissions those end users have on what kind of data that they'll get back in search results. So it's not only contained to your M365 data, it is out of the box, but you're able to connect to other data sources.
But that's amazing, right? Because if you think about, like, it's still not touching the World Wide Web. You still have your own container of Salesforce as an example, or Jira, or DevOps, or whatever. It's interesting because we've got some folks that have talked about utilizing Copilot as a way to interact with their knowledge base from a service perspective. And I think what a great use case for not only, and maybe you start out doing that as an internal, if you want to get super comfortable with the permissions and make sure you've got that all down, but then that could also be a client-facing way to interact with that knowledge base as folks are, we're continually trying to do more with less. This is a nice way to give the information, but not ask your client, hey, here's a 400-page knowledge base. Good luck finding what you want in there, right? So, yeah, very cool. I think that's, I think it's very interesting to think about how we connect all of these things going forward, because it's definitely one of the areas that, as we have talked about big data and connectivity over the last, 20 years, we haven't really had something that can sort of meld it all together. And I feel like we're getting to that point. I mean, do you guys feel that also? Like, okay, we're getting to a point where I can ask it something about, what's on SharePoint, and then also ask it a question that's not related to SharePoint at all, where that data lives in a third-party tool, but maybe I'm using the same Copilot to do that because we've made it extensible in that way.
Absolutely. I think it's the future of work, right? And I think that's Microsoft's mission when you think about modern workplace is how do I stay in the flow of work? And that flow of work might mean that I'm in Teams all day, right? So that little chat button, that chat M365 chat button is Copilot. So I click in that. I never left Teams. I ask a question, I'm seeing search results from all the sources that I'm connected to without having to go into those individual sources. So I do believe that that's really us seeing Microsoft pull that mission together and enable users to stay in the flow of work, be more efficient, to Lauren's point earlier, be more prepared for their day jobs, and not having to go in and out of so many different windows.
Mm-hmm.
Helps with all the context switching, but yeah, go ahead, Lauren.
I was going to say, I also think that's true. The more that we get further down this path, I think we're going to see the need to have more of a platform strategy, right? And I think it's just going to continue to bring that to the forefront of, yes, you can have these other third-party applications that are a little bit more specific, but I think to really see the productivity and efficiency gains that everyone is seeking, and you hear all the buzz about, eventually you're going to have to make a call, right? Do you want everything in the graph, right? Or are you going to double down on another platform, right, or technology medium? And so I think that while they play nicely in the sandbox, I think to really see what people want and are expecting and the buzz is all about, I think that will continue to become more relevant.
Okay, I love that. I think this is awesome. So let me ask you guys one more question. So if I'm new to Copilot, I'm not, but let's just pretend for a minute. So if I'm new to Copilot and I am going to look at rolling this out in my organization, what are like the top 2 or 3 things that I should be thinking about in order to do that? Like, is there something that I need to go, okay, what do I need to do? And it's not a tactical, like, what do I need to do first, but how do I know that I'm going to succeed in this endeavor?
Yeah, having a structured approach when it comes to Copilot is needed. Just turning it on is not going to get the job done, right? And there's lots of proof of that sitting out there in the research land if you want to go check it out. But if you just give someone a license, for example, and they're not used to working that way, they're not going to naturally do it. So having like a structured approach where you're able to sit with different parts of your business and understand from them what use cases might be there, like ideation on, how do you work today? What are problems you're seeing and how you're searching for things or generating things or working with others? Really kind of going through like a design thinking exercise by groups in the business to kind of understand what use cases might be. And then building out, a value framework around that with prioritization, as well as understanding adoption needs, right? So you might have to feed your end users some snippet training where you're teaching them how to prompt Copilot. And maybe those special snippets that you're giving them are in relation to the use cases that you fleshed out during, your ideation that you had with the business. This isn't one of those tools where IT can go, yep, you have a license, I turned it on, see you later. It really only has a genuine impact on the business user if they're taught how to use it and what kind of value they're going to get out of it. So that it kind of has to be an ongoing process. So that's my answer on that.
Yeah, love it. Lauren, did you have any comments on that?
I completely agree with what Gina said. The only thing that I would add is starting small, right? Have those experimental type individuals who are excited about it, who are willing to iterate, won't get maybe frustrated if things don't work exactly as it was supposed to within the first 5 minutes of utilizing it. I think building your internal champions and kind of change management agents, if you will, is really important as part of it. And yeah, I think, but to your point, Gina, like starting with different areas of your business and actually like working alongside them to get them more comfortable is crucial for sure.
Yeah, amazing. Okay, well, I think we've come to our end here, but so I feel like I know a lot more about Copilot than I did when we started, and hopefully everybody else does too. I think the message here is start to play with these things and experiment and start small, build use cases, and have a strategy. Okay, well, thank you guys. Super appreciate you being here. And we'll see everybody in November for our next version of AI Got This. Take care.
Awesome. Thank you.